The story began with our protagonist, Kohei, who was talking on the phone with his friend, asking him to lend him some money, explaining that he was the only person he could rely on. He assured him that he would return the borrowed money by the 15th of the month and apologized for the inconvenience. Our hero felt deeply grateful for his friend's help, describing him as a savior. Kohei felt like a very miserable person. He wondered if anyone lived a life worse than his, describing himself as someone who fails at everything and someone others point to and say, at least we're better off than him. Our hero is an online novelist who can barely make ends meet, and now, at the age of 29, he finds himself borrowing a small amount of money from acquaintances just to pay the rent. He breathed heavily and said he had to survive one more month in this difficult way. He started scrolling through the comments on his novel, which were full of mockery and negative criticism, yet he insisted that everything would make sense later in the story, and that it was all just a build-up for what's to come. He disapproved of their behavior and asked them not to underestimate the value of web novels, even though he knew the readers weren't the real cause of his situation. He sadly said the problem lay in his lack of skill and wished he could be reborn as someone incredibly powerful. Suddenly his nose started bleeding unexpectedly, and he quickly looked around for a tissue. While frantically searching, he was surprised by a strange voice offering him a tissue. When he looked up, he found himself in a strange place, standing before a mysterious man who called him by his real name, Ito Kohei, and knew his age and profession as a novelist. The man told him that the cause of his death was overwork, then introduced himself as Enma Reikon, saying he's usually called King Enma, and welcomed him to hell. Kohei was stunned, and King Enma said that he was indeed dead, but also lucky at the same time. Kohei was confused by the word lucky, a word he was not used to hearing. But Enma explained that his luck came from having the unique number 777777, which granted him one wish that could be fulfilled. Kohei laughed awkwardly and said it was hard to come up with a wish on the spot, especially since he thought he had barely finished his previous work on time. King Enma pointed out that he was very busy, and Kohei needed to make his decision quickly. Kohei felt terrified and a little flustered due to King Enma's overwhelming presence and aura. Kohei shouted excitedly and asked to be reincarnated into the world of a novel, wishing for a life full of adventure and beautiful women. The king was surprised by this wish and asked him which novel he wanted to go to, but clarified that Kohei's own novels were completely out of the question. Kohei became even more flustered and wondered how King Enma knew that, and whether his reputation followed him everywhere, even in hell. Then he began to think and recall a particular novel. He remembered a story about a hero who lived an easy, uncomplicated life, and that was exactly what he wished for. In the end, he enthusiastically chose a novel titled I Became a Failing Student at Hunter School. King Enma granted Kohei's wish, announcing that he would now live inside the story. And because he felt it was a unique and unusual wish, King Enma granted him 2 additional minor wishes as a special gift. Kohei jumped with excitement and asked to be sent into the novel's world 2 years before the story began. Details about the novel Kohei chose were revealed. It was titled I Became a Failing Student at Hunter School, commonly abbreviated as Handdrop. The story revolves around a main character who faces major challenges before joining the Hunter School, whose true potential doesn't shine until the 3rd or 4th year. King Enma wished Kohei a happy life and quickly asked for his final wish before sending him into the novel's world. Kohei thought for a moment, then requested to be extremely handsome. Nervously, he asked for his new appearance to combine the best and most attractive features of celebrities so he could be incredibly good-looking. And in an instant, Kohei disappeared, leaving King Enma and his advisor stunned by the strange nature of his soul and his unexpected wishes, as they had misunderstood what he meant. During his soul's transition, one of them commented that Kohei had chosen to be attractive above all else, and that he would be reincarnated into the body of a side character instead of the main hero. His soul began merging with the body of a character named Kajiyama Ayumu. In the world of the novel, I Became a Failing Student at Hunter School. Kohei woke up, confused and feeling like he was dreaming, and realized that he had indeed died and was now in someone else's body. After a few moments of panic and confusion, he came to understand that he had successfully been reincarnated, but not in the body of the novel's protagonist, rather in that of Kajiyama Ayumu. He was shocked because he thought he'd be reborn as the main character, Amano Satoshi, not as a side character like Ayumu, whom he knew nothing about. At that moment, he began recalling Ayumu's painful memories. Ayumu lived in a world where people discovered their talents as hunters at the age of 10, and those who achieved an acceptable level in the test were admitted to hunter school. But Ayumu was unable to take the test due to mismanagement at the orphanage where he was raised, which falsely reported that all the children were from the lowest class, causing them to live lives far from the world of hunting. After the law changed and tests were reinstated, Ayumu was revealed to be of average level, a category that made up only 15% of the population. But he could no longer join the hunter school because he had surpassed the required age. Ayumu later graduated from a regular school at the age of 20 and worked as a porter for hunters until his hunter abilities finally awakened, and he joined a guild. Kohei realized that Ayumu's memories would return to him gradually to avoid overwhelming his mind, and he also came to understand that this character was just as unlucky as he was. He began to feel deceived because of the unfortunate circumstances he was once again facing, thinking he would be reborn as the story's hero, not as a side character suffering from the same old problems. As he recovered these memories, Kohei clearly understood the nature of Kajiyama's character, a swordsmanship instructor in a side class, a minor character who barely appeared in the novel. He began to feel anger and frustration because he never expected to end up in such a position, sarcastically wondering why he didn't just ask to go to heaven or something like that. He sat down and tried to think of a way to return and confront King Enma, but then remembered that in order to go back to the afterlife, he would have to die again. And he realized that if he chose to commit suicide just to meet King Enma again, he would likely be sent straight to hell. The system announced to Kohei, currently in the role of Kageyama Ayumu, that he would be awakened immediately. Indeed, Kageyama Ayumu woke up startled, shouting angrily and demanding to start over. But he quickly realized that he was truly awake and not dreaming, and that he had indeed died and been reincarnated into one of his own novel worlds. At that moment, the silence of the room was broken by a strange sound. While he was sitting on his bed, his phone suddenly rang, which caught him off guard. Ayumu answered the call and found out it was the financial affairs team from the Chase Guild, informing him that they had deposited his severance bonus and were calling to confirm it. Ayumu listened in confusion, then confirmed receipt of the payment. He looked at his phone and discovered that his bank account held a massive sum of money, over 30 million yen. He was so shocked that he started counting the zeros again to make sure of the amount. He jumped out of bed, overwhelmed with joy after confirming that he actually possessed such a huge amount. He realized that he truly had become someone else and started embracing his new life as Kageyama Ayumu with excitement and happiness. Although 30 million yen may not be a huge amount to some, for a struggling novelist who nearly died from overwork, that amount was like a dream he could never have imagined. Ayumu looked out the window and realized the world he now lived in resembled modern-day Japan, despite the presence of monsters, hunters, and magical gates. Ayumu reflected on his new life and appearance. He was now 25 years old, with a large amount of money and striking good looks. He was also now a B-rank hunter, a category known for being common and not having any special advantages. Ayumu recalled that in the original story, Kageyama was a side character who didn't have much of an impact on the events, and was treated as a background figure as the story progressed, especially compared to the protagonist. Ayumu smiled and told himself that this situation was actually perfect for him, because his goal from the start was never to become a prominent hero, but to live a comfortable, easy life. He remembered that I Became a Failing Student at Hunter School had two main protagonists, Tsukizaki Makoto, the original hero, and Amano Satoshi, who transmigrated into the story and became a villainous character. Amano Satoshi was able to use his knowledge of the story's events to seize the opportunities originally meant for the true protagonist, using his vast wealth to buy spiritual potions and becoming a strong rival to the original hero. But Ayumu knew very well that he didn't need to compete with either of them, since his situation was different from the beginning. He had no intention of taking over the story or becoming a central figure. He realized that in truth, he didn't care about getting involved with any of the main characters, since his desire to be a hero was originally just a way to secure an easy, peaceful life. Kageyama Ayumu began to feel completely at ease, since all he had to do now was work quietly and earn money. He remembered the reality of this world, that one day, massive gates suddenly appeared in the sky, unleashing terrifying monsters that swept across the earth, threatening human life. At that critical moment, the heroes Tsukizaki Makoto and Amano Satoshi appeared, leading a large group of brave fighters to battle these monsters and protect humanity. People watched the scene with anxiety and tension, wondering whether these two young men could truly stand against such an overwhelming disaster. One man declared with great confidence that the two young heroes were humanity's only hope, and that everyone should support and encourage them with all their strength. The crowd cheered wildly for Amano Satoshi, whom they called the light and hope of humanity. On the other side, others cheered just as passionately for the hero Tsukizaki Makoto, calling on him to save the world. The excitement was clear on the faces of the crowd, who placed all their trust and hope in these two heroes. But amidst this charged atmosphere, Ayumu stood silently, preoccupied with his phone, and completely uninterested in what was happening around him. Ayumu muttered to himself that he was just waiting for his wish to come true, and started feeling a bit nervous. But he soon joined in the hype in a sarcastic way, cheering comically for big corporations like Mitsubishi and Tesla. In a burst of excitement, Ayumu shouted that stock prices had hit their lowest point, and that this was his perfect chance to buy in. As the battle continued, stock values began rising rapidly, and Ayumu already knew that the two heroes would save the world without needing his help. So he felt immense joy because he started earning a lot of money thanks to the sudden changes in the stock market, though it was all in his imagination. Suddenly, he received a notification on his phone, informing him that he had won a special lottery related to stocks, making him feel like he had won the actual jackpot. Ayumu smirked slyly and told himself he would live peacefully and quietly until the day everything spun out of control. He then decided to live with great caution by following the events of the original story closely and began preparing for the day he would start working. The next morning, Ayumu headed to his new job at the Hunter School, beginning his role as a swordsmanship instructor. After leaving the Chase Guild, Ayumu officially joined the Hunter School as a teacher. Before starting his job, he decided to dig deeper into the life of the original character he was now living as. During his research, he discovered that Kageyama Ayumu had no social life at all, and that he had been an extremely lonely and isolated person. Ayumu was surprised when he saw how few contacts were saved on the phone, and realized the original character had lived in deep isolation. He recalled a past moment when others used to mock the original character and called him a weirdo, which made Ayumu feel angry. He then started thinking about his previous life, remembering the things he couldn't achieve, like love and marriage, due to being constantly busy writing novels. Ayumu recalled how, in his past life, he used to tell himself that being alone was better, that solitude was his preference, but deep down, he knew it was just a way to justify his loneliness. There had been many personal and family-related reasons that pushed him toward isolation. He remembered a time when he had to leave during a work meeting, promising to return quickly to finish editing his novel. Back in those days, it had been extremely hard for him, as a struggling writer, to even meet basic needs, so love had always felt like a distant fantasy. But now he started to feel that things had changed, and even though he wasn't the main character, he had already gained so many good things in this new life. Ayumu finally felt like he was getting closer to the life he had always wanted, and he began to feel truly content with his new reality. Kageyama Ayumu stood in front of the staff room door, feeling excited and determined to try new things he had never experienced in his previous life. He entered the room with a bright smile and confidently introduced himself to the staff inside as the new swordsmanship instructor. As he walked in, he noticed a strange quietness and wondered to himself about the reason for this suspicious silence. He looked a bit tense until his colleague, Hayashi Masao, warmly welcomed him and invited him to sit beside him. Ayumu thanked him politely and expressed his hope for cooperation and working together. Word quickly spread that a handsome new teacher had arrived at the school, and many of the female staff members were impressed and wondered if he was really a teacher and not an actor. Ayumu felt shy but responded kindly and humbly, saying he was just an ordinary person. He knew well that his handsome face was part of the deal he made for his new life. One of the staff asked him about the guild he had previously worked for, and he replied that he had been with the Chase Guild. This surprised the female staff, who started praising the guild and said it was amazing that someone so young had chosen to teach. Ayumu felt delighted and more confident from the compliments, and he began to feel more connected with the people around him. Suddenly, someone else entered the room and loudly announced that a special person from the Chase Guild had joined the teaching staff, catching everyone's attention. This person introduced himself as Mozaki Yamato, a second-year spear techniques instructor from the Wakasho Guild and a graduate of Hunter School. Yamato asked Ayumu which school he had graduated from and commented on how good-looking he was. The staff began guessing which school Ayumu might have attended, wondering if it was school 4 or 7. One of them said if he had graduated from her school, she would have recognized him immediately, so she guessed school 5. At that moment, Ayumu smiled and replied that he hadn't graduated from any hunter school at all, which shocked everyone. One of the staff members asked how he could become a hunter without graduating from a hunter academy and wondered if he had studied abroad or held dual nationality. Ayumu assured her that he was fully Japanese and that there are hunters who didn't graduate from specialized schools. He was one of them. A moment of silence filled the room after his answer. Yamato then laughed and said Ayumu should have clarified that from the start to avoid confusion. He then left the room saying he was heading out for a smoke before the morning meeting, followed by the other staff. Ayumu remained with Hayashi, who awkwardly admitted that he thought someone from the Chase Guild would be more than just an unlicensed hunter. Ayumu felt the atmosphere suddenly grow cold and strange, and he began to recall memories of the original Kageyama Ayumu. He remembered that there were special tests used to assess hunters' potential, which involved liquids extracted from a monster called ceramine, and that each test cost 10,000 yen. He also remembered the orphanage director being arrested for illegally distributing hunter tests, and how he later took a real test with the help of a fellow orphan named Yuki. Still, he had never graduated from a hunter school, which caused major difficulties for him and others like him who didn't receive the formal training offered by the academies. Due to this educational gap, these unaccredited hunters fought for their rights and protested to end the discrimination against them. Even though a law had been passed to prevent employers from asking about educational backgrounds during hiring, some institutions still distinguished between certified hunter school graduates and others. Discriminatory feelings continued to grow significantly among certified hunters toward those who hadn't attended formal schools. Kageyama Ayumu realized it would be better to hide the fact that he hadn't graduated from a specialized hunter school and wished he had known that earlier. He felt frustrated because others seemed uncomfortable with his background, even though he personally had never participated in protests or signed any petitions in the past. Teacher Hayashi approached him and apologized for the trouble that had happened on his first day of work, asking for his understanding of the current situation. Deep down, Ayumu decided to endure it for the sake of a comfortable retirement later and expressed his understanding of the others' resentment toward him. He continued speaking with a confused tone, pointing out that his joining the school despite not being a graduate of a specialized academy naturally gave the impression he was hired through favoritism. He then asked Hayashi, somewhat awkwardly, if he really was hired because of preferential treatment, but Hayashi clearly assured him that he had passed the test and was officially and properly selected. Hayashi then explained that this was a hunter school, not a regular school, emphasizing that the concept of favoritism didn't exist there at all. At the same time, a conversation was happening among some of the other teachers. One of them sarcastically commented that the school must be in a serious financial crisis, since they had to hire teachers through favoritism. Yamato said that first-year students focus only on fitness and basic skills, suggesting that the school probably hired Ayumu to teach those students in particular. Two female teachers spoke sarcastically, with one saying Ayumu was very handsome, but not fit to be a teacher since he hadn't graduated from a hunter school. The other added mockingly that his educational background was unsuitable and called it a huge waste. One of the teachers suggested to the other that they advise their students to look for private swordsmanship lessons outside of school. She added that having someone like Ayumu teaching students could endanger their lives after graduation. But Ayumu suddenly appeared before them, surprising and embarrassing the teachers. Ayumu smiled, trying to ease the tension, and said he was just asking about the smoking area. He admitted with an awkward smile that he had overheard part of the conversation by accident and asked if they had time to chat a little before the morning meeting. One of the teachers tried to accuse him of eavesdropping, but he calmly denied it, saying he had just overheard them by chance, though inside, he was annoyed by the situation. Still, he reminded himself he was putting up with it for the sake of money. Ayumu then explained to them that he was worried their misunderstanding about him might spread among the students, stressing that he was not hired through any preferential treatment. He added with a calm smile that he looked forward to cooperating with them. Suddenly, Yamato interrupted, filled with anger, and told Ayumu that the issue wasn't about favoritism, it was about something more important, his eligibility to be a teacher in the first place. The teacher added irritably that Ayumu had no right to get involved or speak on such matters since he hadn't graduated from a specialized school. He then sharply told him to back off, not interfere in their affairs, and stop causing them more trouble. Yamato instructed the female teachers to keep their distance from Ayumu, pointing out that they already had regular teachers they could interact with. After they left, the two female teachers talked about how harsh Yamato had been toward Ayumu, admitting that Ayumu's sword skills were probably good since he was a B-rank instructor, but they still doubted his ability because of his educational background. Yamato suddenly turned to Ayumu with a challenging smile and said that if he was upset, he could request an official duel. He then explained that he had a promotion exam coming up to reach A rank and suggested Ayumu wait until he passed to challenge him, so that it wouldn't be too embarrassing if Ayumu lost. Ayumu remained silent, feeling discouraged, and realized deep down that this was the reason the original character felt so isolated. Ayumu suddenly remembered his previous life as a writer, when he had felt great joy after finishing one of his novels, thinking it was really good this time. But he was deeply disappointed when someone told him the novel was only good for an amateur and mocked him by saying he hadn't even graduated from a specialized school. That person then advised him to give up on going professional and just keep writing as a hobby, warning him that, over time, he might come to hate writing altogether. Ayumu began to recall a time when he was reading the negative comments he had received about his novel, and he felt deeply upset by the harsh criticism directed at him. He also remembered the life of the original character he now inhabited and realized it wasn't any less miserable than his previous life as a writer. Ayumu wondered thoughtfully whether a stable life without purpose or ambition was truly worth living. Meanwhile, Yamato was leaving the area when Ayumu called out to him, asking him to wait. Yamato turned back, annoyed, and asked what he wanted this time. At that moment, Ayumu decided that the time had come to showcase his strength and prove himself to everyone. With great confidence, Ayumu announced that he accepted the challenge, insisting on facing Yamato in a decisive duel. His two co-workers were surprised by his actions, and one of them asked if he was in his right mind. Yamato responded mockingly to Ayumu's declaration, saying he would pretend it never happened if Ayumu decided to back down now. But Ayumu responded with utmost seriousness, affirming his resolve to go through with the duel and declaring there was no turning back. In this world, dueling was the official way to resolve disputes between hunters. Refusing a duel was seen as a great shame, unless the reasons were unreasonable or unfair. Ayumu clearly stated that he was compelled to accept the duel due to the strong bias against him as a graduate from a non-specialized school. He even offered Yamato the option to postpone the duel until after his promotion exam to rank A, if he preferred. But Yamato grew furious and accused Ayumu of belittling him, declaring that duels allowed anything short of killing and that he wouldn't be responsible if Ayumu sustained serious injuries. Ayumu remained completely calm and sarcastically asked if Yamato was done talking yet. Yamato scheduled the duel for 1 week later in the training grounds and asked the two female colleagues to witness the match. He then mockingly advised Ayumu to start looking for a new job in preparation for his inevitable defeat. Yamato and the two women left the area, while Ayumu remained standing, silently watching them go. The rest of the day passed quickly for Ayumu without him even realizing it. The next morning he entered the classroom full of energy and introduced himself to the students, who looked at him with admiration. He noticed that the swordsmanship skills he had previously worried about now came to him instinctively whenever he held a sword. He realized that the original character's memories had gifted his new body with incredible abilities in the art of the sword. Ayumu began teaching the students with ease and confidence, demonstrating sword techniques with skill in a clear and simple manner. The students responded enthusiastically to his confident teaching style and training methods. His job was relatively easy since the first-year students were only learning the basics of swordsmanship and physical fitness. In the afternoon, Ayumu entered another classroom and introduced himself again, but he noticed the students there didn't seem very interested in him. While preparing for the lesson, Ayumu received a note from one of the students asking if the rumors about his upcoming duel with Yamato were true. He realized the two female teachers were the ones who had spread the rumors, confident that Yamato would win the match without a doubt. But Ayumu responded to the students with a calm smile, assuring them that the most important thing was for a person to never give up, no matter the circumstances. He continued speaking in front of the students, admitting that he knew they had heard rumors about him graduating from a school that wasn't meant for hunters. At first glance, he seemed hesitant, and said that, honestly, he had no confidence in his abilities. Then, with a smile, he added that he had no confidence in his ability to lose, a clear reference to his upcoming challenge. The students were surprised by his words, but he went on to say that they shouldn't think about this matter right now, and should instead focus on the lesson. Internally, he thought to himself that he had planned to influence the students psychologically by displaying confidence, and that would have half the desired effect. He then headed to the bus station and asked for a ticket to a specific destination. As he left aboard the bus, he thought that half of that confidence was actually real. He realized that from now on, many things in his life would change. During his journey, he remembered how education in hunter schools fostered a sense of arrogance among their graduates, and he decided he would learn on his own if they were going to look down on him because of that arrogance. Ayumu mentioned that the first advantage the original story's protagonist, Handdrop, obtained was the inner power technique. This technique was inspired by martial arts novels, and it wasn't something commonly found in isekai stories. He realized that if the first event had granted him a spiritual tool or medicine, then the rival protagonist, Amano Satoshi, who knows the future, would have acted with more caution. Ayumu remembered that in the original story, Amano Satoshi took advantage of the opportunities that were supposed to go to the true protagonist, Tsukizaki Makoto. But Ayumu wasn't interested in becoming the strongest person in the world. All he needed was enough strength to win his upcoming duel. He arrived at the entrance of a cave that housed the first major event in the story, a magical gate containing the secret of the inner power technique. Without hesitation, Ayumu entered the gate and was instantly transported to another place. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a cold, snow-covered land. He was stunned by the beauty of the place, as it hadn't been described in detail in the original novel. He quickly reminded himself that this wasn't the time to admire the scenery. He had to find the clue quickly. Suddenly, he felt a suspicious presence behind him, and before he could fully turn around, he was struck by a powerful attack that knocked him to the ground. He got up feeling pain and shock, wondering what had just happened. Behind him stood a mysterious man in old clothes, who said he was surprised Ayumu managed to partially dodge his attack, and confirmed that he wasn't an ordinary person. The man asked Ayumu to state his name, affiliation, and the sect that sent him, as well as how he had arrived at this place. Ayumu was shocked when he realized he could understand the Chinese language, and wondered if this was an ability that the original Kageyama Ayumu possessed. He quickly raised his hands and told the man in clear Chinese that he was a teacher from a hunter school in Japan, and that he had arrived through a gate. The man looked puzzled by Ayumu's words and said he didn't understand any of the terms he used, like Japan, hunter school, and gate. Ayumu pointed to the large white gate behind him and asked the man if he could see it. The man replied that he could only see the snow surrounding them from all directions. The mysterious man told Ayumu that he had been trapped in this place for countless years and had stopped counting after 30. Ayumu felt confused as he wondered why this man was present at the location where he was supposed to find the clue. He gathered his courage and hesitantly asked if the man was Zhao Liuliang. The man was surprised that Ayumu knew his name and said with astonishment that it had been a long time since anyone had spoken his name aloud. Zhao asked Ayumu how he knew his name, and Ayumu felt confused again, realizing internally that this man was the creator of the secret technique that the main protagonist acquires in the original novel. But Ayumu found it strange, because in the novel, Zhao never appeared in person when the protagonist arrived. Instead, he only left behind the technique's clue. Then Ayumu suddenly realized that he had been transported to this world 2 years before the events of the novel began. It became clear to him that he was now meeting Zhao before he had reached the stage of immortality, the point at which he would disappear, meaning Ayumu was in a completely different situation from what he had read in the story. Trying to make use of his knowledge of the novel, Ayumu began telling Zhao that he wanted to share a story. Zhao's curiosity was piqued, so Ayumu started narrating a tale about a legendary swordsman who fought a fierce dragon in the Central Lands. Zhao showed interest and smiled, saying that the hero in the story sounded a lot like Ayumu himself, which made Ayumu feel relieved that he had managed to capture his attention. Suddenly, Ayumu knelt to the ground and asked Zhao to teach him his skills, stating that he had come here specifically to seek his guidance and that he was not a bad person. Zhao coldly rejected the request and told Ayumu that he would spare him this time and let him go, refusing to help him. At that moment, Ayumu casually mentioned that his upcoming opponent in the duel used a spear, which made Zhao stop abruptly. Zhao asked with clear interest what Ayumu had just said, and Ayumu repeated that he was about to duel an opponent who uses a spear. Then Ayumu asked seriously, which is better, the spear or the sword? Zhao explained that the spear had the advantage in terms of range, and with proper training, it could be used to create powerful soldiers. He added that the spear clearly surpasses in terms of reach and destructive power. After giving his opinion, Zhao told Ayumu to leave, saying that now he understood the situation well and needed to protect his life. Ayumu felt angered by Zhao's attitude and decided that he couldn't just leave after coming all this way. He spoke out loudly in frustration, saying that he had come here seeking an answer, but now it seemed the sword could never defeat the spear. Mocking himself, Ayumu said he might as well go back and start practicing how to apologize and beg for forgiveness in front of everyone in next week's duel. He began thinking about the best way to apologize and appease the spearmaster he had challenged. As Ayumu prepared to return, he started practicing apology phrases out loud, saying that compared to his opponent's spear, his sword was nothing more than a stick. No, more like a toothpick. At that moment, Zhao suddenly stopped, visibly angry, and addressed Ayumu, saying that his last comment was absolutely correct in principle. Then Zhao turned around with fierce rage and said in a terrifying voice that his sword could pierce dragons. And Ayumu's audacity to mention the spear in front of him meant he was ready to lose his head, but that he admired Ayumu's boldness and would help him this one time only. Ayumu tried to wipe his tears, feeling deeply embarrassed after Zhao called him weak. He thanked Zhao and then asked what he meant by the help he had mentioned earlier. With excitement, he continued, wondering if the help involved a secret manual or perhaps a spiritual medicine to boost his strength. In a sudden move, Zhao struck Ayumu with tremendous force, saying he would give him something far better. Ayumu felt an intense pain, as if his body was burning, and he collapsed to the ground from the agony, while Zhao told him that his energy was far too weak for a warrior. He then explained that he had injected a quantity of energy into Ayumu's body channels, and that his dantian would open in 4 days, with noticeable changes in his body occurring over the next 8. He pointed toward the open gate and told Ayumu that although he didn't know his opponent's skill, he wouldn't lose easily anymore. Ayumu was confused and overwhelmed by this new power, not fully understanding what had just happened to him, but Zhao told him to return if he won the duel. Zhao informed Ayumu that he could not leave this place himself and asked him to go back to his world and prove to everyone the superiority of the sword. A week later, Ayumu stood in the spear training arena, ready for his duel against Yamato. Some of the instructors were watching the match. Yamato mocked Ayumu, asking if he had found a new job in preparation for his upcoming defeat. Ayumu responded calmly and confidently, asking Yamato to stop talking and begin the duel immediately. Yamato smiled confidently and told Ayumu he would give him the first strike, knowing that a spear user had the advantage in countering. Ayumu assumed an offensive stance and felt his body unusually light, ready to seize this opportunity Yamato had given him. Ayumu moved with incredible speed, realizing that he had indeed become strong enough not to lose easily. Although he still felt unsure about whether he could win, he leapt decisively toward his opponent. In the moment of confrontation, Ayumu screamed to himself that he would never return to the hesitant, weak life he had once lived. He struck with such astonishing and unexpected power that Yamato's clothes were completely torn in the middle of the fight. Everyone, including the referee and the observing instructors, was shocked by the sheer strength of Ayumu's unexpected attack. Yamato fell to the ground in severe pain, his clothes completely shredded by the force of the blow. Ayumu himself was stunned by the power of his strike, something he had never anticipated. The duel ended with Ayumu's victory, and the referee officially announced his win. Everyone rushed to call for medical assistance for Yamato due to his serious injury, and Ayumu was left in shock by what had happened. He remembered Zhao's words, saying that his dantian would open in 4 days and that he would feel noticeable changes, and he realized his body had become abnormally strong. Ayumu was both amazed and angry at the way Zhao had changed his body, unable to fully grasp the extent of his newfound power. He recalled the story of the original novel's protagonist, who, even after taking spiritual medicines, already possessed strong abilities beforehand. Ayumu looked at his hands in awe, never expecting the power he had gained to be so frightening. Suddenly, he was interrupted by the voice of his fellow teacher, Hayashi, calling out to him in deep concern and asking if he had been injured during the duel. Ayumu answered with a calm smile, saying he was fine, and asked if Hayashi had seen the match. Hayashi replied excitedly that he had, and was absolutely amazed by Ayumu's movements, which he could barely follow due to their speed. Internally, Hayashi now understood why the students admired and respected Ayumu so much, and he felt immense happiness about what had happened, especially since he had some issues with Yamato himself. After the duel ended, Professor Hayashi approached Ayumu, expressing his happiness that he was all right, and offered to celebrate the occasion with him. Meanwhile, Yamato was lying on a stretcher in a pitiful state, while some of the other teachers excitedly shouted their desire to join the celebration. 2 female teachers also wanted to participate, though they were embarrassed by what had happened. Professor Hayashi then announced that every teacher should contribute 2,000 yen toward the celebration. Ayumu went with his colleagues to celebrate, feeling overjoyed by his victory. One of his colleagues raised his hand high in the air amid the cheerful and festive atmosphere. Ayumu enjoyed the celebration and laughed along with his colleagues. Everyone seemed happy as they raised their glasses. Ayumu then began singing enthusiastically at the party, while his colleagues laughed and cheered him on. Ayumu returned home completely drunk and collapsed on his bed, exhausted. He mumbled half asleep that he couldn't drink anymore, noting that it was already 4 a.m. when he got home. Normally a person would suffer from a hangover the next morning, but Ayumu's recently altered dantian began purging his body on its own. Ayumu woke up feeling intense heat and heavy sweating, but his body was undergoing unexpected changes. He noticed that he had gained physical abilities far beyond what he had expected. He sat on the bed, completely stunned by the fact that he didn't feel any headache or fatigue from the drinking, and realized that he could only blame the man who had changed his body. Ayumu decided to visit the old man Zhao again, and stepped into the magical gate that led to the place where that man lived. Ayumu arrived in the icy place, and began thinking that he hadn't expected to return here, but he felt he had to at least thank the man who saved his life. He walked carefully across the snowy terrain, the ground fully covered in snow, and the weather extremely cold. As he continued, he wondered if the old man was truly unable to leave the gate, especially given the difficulty of living in such an environment devoid of animals. Finally, Ayumu reached the place where the old man sat. The man looked at him and calmly asked if he had come back again. Ayumu was then asked whether he had won his duel with the spear user. Ayumu proudly replied that he defeated his opponent in a single strike, to which Zhao sarcastically remarked that his opponent must have been very weak. But Ayumu quickly explained that his opponent wasn't weak, but rather a well-known and very strong individual, then said that he had come to ask about something specific. Ayumu asked the old man what he had done to his body that day, and Zhao replied calmly that he had only opened his dantian enough for Ayumu to protect himself from defeat. Zhao then asked Ayumu to tell him about the combat technique his opponent used, and the strength of his internal energy, clearly showing his interest in the details of the duel. At that moment, Ayumu finally realized that he had become very powerful thanks to martial arts, and that this was the true nature of the power he had suddenly gained. He remembered that he had obtained this power directly by learning martial arts, whereas the original protagonist of the novel had struggled greatly to acquire it. Ayumu then paused and told Zhao there was something he didn't understand. Zhao asked what he meant. Zhao explained that Ayumu's dantian had actually been sealed, but there had been a small amount of internal energy that had gradually accumulated in his body due to his constant practice of dueling. Ayumu listened attentively, wondering to himself about this primitive method his body had relied on to gather energy. Ayumu asked Zhao the name of the country he lived in before coming to this place, and Zhao answered clearly that it was the Ming dynasty, and that the emperor at the time was Zhu Yuanzhang. At that moment, Ayumu realized that Zhao Liuliang came from a world entirely different from the one of the hunters that he knew, which explained Zhao's lack of knowledge about many aspects of the hunter world. Ayumu calmly said that he loved history and that he had known Zhao Liuliang as a legendary swordsman in history, but seeing him in person was an entirely different experience. Ayumu told Mr. Zhao Liuliang that martial arts no longer existed in the outside world. Zhao was deeply surprised by what he heard and asked in astonishment what Ayumu meant. Ayumu began explaining that a long time had passed since Zhao's era, and that new combat methods had gradually emerged, causing the old arts to be forgotten over time. At that moment, Zhao realized that his long stay in this place had made him lose track of time, and that time had passed faster than he had imagined. Sensing Zhao's sadness at the news, Ayumu decided to try to cheer him up, so he took out some nutritious food from his bag, brought from the outside world, and offered it to him. Zhao cautiously ate the food according to the instructions Ayumu had given him, but he instantly felt it tasted terrible and spit it out immediately. Then he said in confusion that the outside world must be suffering from some illness that makes people eat such strange food. Ayumu thought to himself that Zhao was used to eating premium Korean ginseng, not this kind of food, and felt pity for his current situation. After that, Ayumu asked Zhao if he liked sweet things, to which Zhao seriously replied that he wasn't a child to enjoy such things. Still, Ayumu offered him a piece of chocolate, explaining that they eat it in cold weather. Zhao admired the chocolate's packaging and decided to give it a try. Upon tasting it, his face lit up with clear signs of delight, and he expressed his satisfaction with the taste in a way that clearly showed he was enjoying it. Zhao's facial expression left Ayumu both baffled and disappointed from sheer surprise at the old man's reaction. Zhao then looked sharply at Ayumu and told him that he liked the chocolate very much, and asked him to bring more if he had any. That's when Ayumu realized Zhao had eaten all the emergency food he had brought with him. Ayumu asked Zhao how he usually ate food in this place, and Zhao replied that he hadn't felt true hunger in a long time, and that he only ate for the taste. After realizing the food had run out, Zhao eagerly asked Ayumu if there was more. He then calmed down a bit and commented that the food had slightly improved his mood, and asked once more if the Ming dynasty had truly disappeared. Ayumu confirmed to him that traditional martial arts had indeed vanished from the modern world, and that hunters had replaced martial artists. Zhao turned away in silent contemplation after hearing this news. Zhao explained that he had long since lost his sense of time, and his focus had shifted solely toward achieving the state of transcendence. After opening Ayumu's dantian, Zhao told him that he was now the only person in the outside world who could be considered a true martial artist. He also explained that there was a vast difference between those who practiced martial arts and those who didn't. Zhao then asked Ayumu how he planned to use this new power. Ayumu simply replied that he didn't have any special plans, and that he just wanted to live a normal life, maybe using his new strength for simple things like drinking and recovering from hangovers. Zhao looked at Ayumu with a sharp, contemplative gaze. Ayumu continued, saying that he might also use his strength to wake up early or play video games more comfortably. After a moment of silence, Zhao asked Ayumu what his name was. Ayumu replied that his name was Kageyama Ayumu. Internally, Zhao reflected on Ayumu's personality and thought that he was someone without ambition. He seemed like a teacher instructing children in the basics of martial arts. He noted that Ayumu didn't seem like someone who would misuse the knowledge he had been given. Ayumu stood before Zhao, who began to introduce himself, saying that he was the unparalleled swordsman who had slain the dragon and saved the Central Plains. Ayumu listened to these words calmly and confirmed to Zhao that he already knew that very well. Zhao turned toward the horizon, murmuring the name Kageyama Ayumu, as if deeply contemplating something. After a moment of silence, Zhao turned back to Ayumu with a gentle smile and announced his decision to take him on as his disciple. But Ayumu responded firmly and resolutely, rejecting the offer without hesitation.